We're all meat. There's really nothing that you can do about that. As much as people pretend that there is something you can do, there's not. So this video is going to have minor spoilers for Together. So if you would like to be completely know nothing that's going on, don't watch this and just save it for after. And I feel like I say this every single video and like I put it in the caption every time, but there's going to be some unsettling, disturbing horror imagery in this, clips, etc. Especially for this video because I'm talking about body horror today, which like I think is maybe arguably the most gory of all the horror subgenres. But I understand Together is not out yet, and I do want to say the spoilers and analysis I'm going to do is just like really quick, and it's not going to ruin the movie for you. I really think that everybody should go see it. It's really great and scary, but it inspired me to make this video. So first of all, I want to say that it is very frightening, and I am really obsessed with the themes that they used. And that sounds like so generic to say about a horror movie, but I really like horror that deals with like interpersonal themes. Like that's why I really like Midsommar and Hereditary, all the psychological horrors, because I like drama in my horror movie. Like I like there to be like something else going on other than just the horror. That's why I'm not a huge slasher fan. So without going into too much detail, the relationship dynamics are fascinating. And in my opinion, they're bringing out the worst parts of each other, which I think unfortunately is true for a lot of couples. If you just kind of look around, I think the state of dating is really fucked up right now. So it just came at a really perfect time. And you'll see what I mean when you watch it, but these two characters in this relationship bring out the worst parts of each other. And it's very obvious to everybody. It's obvious to their friends. And their insecurities are pairing together for a really like toxic situation where one of the people in the couple is very overbearing and controlling, and the other person is very clingy and is like becoming less of themselves. And can those be fixed with therapy? Probably, but that's not really the point. So spoiler alert, they come into contact with a sort of death cult that uses a supernatural force to fuse couples together into one person. And I don't think that's that much of a spoiler. Like the advertising makes that really, really obvious. So the entire movie is based on this concept from Plato's Symposium, where there is a story about love, and it's a kind of comedic metaphor for like finding your soulmate, but it is pretty dark. And basically it says that long ago, humans were not as they are now. Each person was a complete sphere with 2 faces, 4 arms, and 4 legs, a powerful being made of 2 humans fused back to back. At the core of it, my opinion is this is like a fundamentally bad way to look at relationships. It is very easy to get along with someone who is essentially yourself. The less you disagree with someone and the more they bend to your will or the other way around, the less friction that there is. I think in a perfect relationship, people are egalitarian, retaining their individuality while bringing out the best parts of each other. And that is like way easier said than done. I don't think humans are capable of being this perfect 8-legged creature of like perfect love and harmony. And there's a reason that it's so jarring, and there's a reason that we aren't. The hard work of a relationship is essentially discovering if you being together as 2 completely separate individuals is an overall good idea. Do you respect each other, bring out the best in each other, and have like healthy friction and disagreements? Or are you enmeshing with each other, becoming codependent, and trying to be one thing? Together is a really expert showcase of why that's not like the ideal relationship, you guys being one person, because it's horrifying, but also it ends up being really tragic and kind of sad in a way because it leads to 2 deaths. And that's kind of the most interesting part of Together, but it does have some really crazy body horror. What it looks like when the 2 humans are essentially fusing together is the reason I'm making this video, because of how scarring and how horrifying that visual was. And I literally can't get it out of my head. It's the worst thing. And it's a really beautiful, perfect metaphor for codependence and enmeshment and like toxicity within a couple, because it's horrifying, but it also really makes a complicated topic very simple. And body horror is so perfect for this because it makes really heavy, crazy, complicated topics into the simplest thing that it can possibly be. Because there's only so much that you can do to the body, right? And it's the simplest thing that we understand is things to do with our body. It's the first thing that we know. And I was so affected by some of the shots in this film that it reminded me of this book, All Tomorrows. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I really have to say they did such an incredible job making this really, really unsettling and disturbing. So today I'm going to talk about some of my favorite, actually really frightening body horror, but then also what I think body horror means and why everybody wants to see it. Because I feel like that word just gets tossed around kind of randomly lately. I think it's deeply misunderstood as a symbolic device because of how grotesque and shocking it can be. Body horror is essentially any type of media that intentionally showcases grotesque or psychologically disturbing violations of the human body or of another creature, like maybe a dog. This definition, as you can imagine, includes so many films. You can even put in a lot of crime thrillers and dramas into this definition. It's not just a horror thing. My personal opinion as to why this is such a gigantic plot device is because of, first of all, like I said before, just the simplicity of body horror and how good of a metaphor it is because of how jarring and clear it is, but also because of this really insane primal push and pull that we all have towards pain and pleasure with our bodies. All of us have bodies. We are all meat bodies. That is something that basically applies to every single person walking on this earth. We are all deeply, deeply inherently aware of the limitations of having a body. These limitations include dying, aging, danger, falling, getting sunburned, eating too much, getting sick. We are ephemeral beings that will age and die and wither away, and that's just something that our brains don't like to think about because we think that we are so smart. When the physical fact of the matter is that we are physical brains in bodies and our personalities and our lives live in our brains. But along with the horror and surprise and pain that comes with having a body and the limitations of that, it is also the vessel in which we experience anything good or worthwhile or amazing. And as simple and obvious as that is or seems to be, it is such an easy target for media because it's extremely relatable. So of course people want to see body horror because it's a spectacle that you can't look away from because it's so deeply personal and complicated for everybody. I think this philosophy is really well articulated in Hellraiser, and as dated and silly as that movie is now on rewatch, it works with two subjects that should not work together but do. And it's a perfect example of how body horror works with this push and pull of pain and pleasure. On one hand, it is combining desire, specifically sexual desire, and horror and gore and pain, obviously. To me, it is discussing the alienation that can happen from yourself when your own body is experiencing desire that your brain doesn't want it to experience. Our bodies do things that our mind and our reason do not like. In Hellraiser, the wife is attracted to her horrible, not even that cute, brother-in-law, and she ruins her life over it and she starts killing people over it. Her desire basically ruins her life and ends with her own death. So she essentially ruins her life because of her physical desire and what her body wants, and her brain does not want that, and she's struggling with that the entire film. And there is extreme sexual themes and metaphors in this film alongside extreme gore and pain and basically hell. And the film really works because of this push and pull of our bodies and our minds and pain and pleasure and how those things really get intertwined and fucked up. We all struggle to some extent with something that our body wants that our brain does not want. In popular culture, it's all pretty funny to me how we're basically seeing a rampage of content about overcoming the imperfect and weak bodily desires like food, pleasure, and enjoyment. And instead, there's this glorification of being a perfectly oiled, disciplined, looks maxed machine. And that's kind of on the masculine side. On the feminine side, I'm seeing a lot of made from scratch content. No processed food content, perfect eating habits and perfect bodies, Pilates princess content. And they're not putting anything unhealthy in their bodies, and they're also looking extremely perfect. And then of course, with those two spheres of like perfection content, you have like this irony, satire content playing off of those spheres, which is like creating this really weird kind of rabbit hole thing that's going on. And it's becoming really weird out here. Like, it's really strange. But despite what I feel about any of those people, you have to admit, if the body wasn't so hard to overcome, like, this content wouldn't be interesting. It wouldn't even be popular. If it wasn't impressive or interesting that someone is able to completely overcome the desires of the body, if that weren't true, this wouldn't even be a thing. And this wouldn't be the most popular content pushing like our entire pop culture. Everybody knows that there is a push and pull between how much we're willing to discipline our bodies and how much our bodies desire certain things. I think everybody struggles to some extent with some kind of mental illness, addiction, trauma, things in your brain that have been written there that are very hard to overcome. It's just like, you can't have one without the other. You have to admit that our bodies are very, very powerful in deciding what we do. So there's a really interesting push and pull between what our body wants and what our souls or our minds want. And I think body horror is the niche response to that in media. Like, showcasing body horror has this feeling of violence and frustration, and it almost seems like always angry. I have rarely seen body horror that hasn't been some kind of pent up and then released. Like, it seems like a lot of scenes of body horror have either like a violence, frustration, or a release to them. The frustration of having limitations like acne, aging, desire, embarrassment, insecurity, of having a body is something that everybody understands the frustration of. And specifically with like smexual body horror, I think this is another way to release this frustration of, society will not let me desire what I want to desire, what my body wants. I'm very angry. There is always something you're battling with the body that you're in. It is the ultimate conduit of pleasure and the most heartbreaking source of tragedy and betrayal. You don't die alone, you die with your body. So with my thoughts on that, I want to talk today about my favorite body horror, specifically the ones that scare me, because I've seen a lot of body horror, not all of it gets to me for some reason. So the first one I'm going to talk about is actually the only non-movie media I want to discuss. And I just had to say it because of how much Together reminded me of this media specifically. There is a final scene in Together where the couple is merging, and there is a few shots in the middle where they're like halfway merged. And it is like seriously extremely disgusting and frightening. It just immediately connected me to reading All Tomorrows, and like the visuals and the sketches in All Tomorrows. They are like humanoid, but they're so creepy and almost like bug-like or animalistic and weird. What All Tomorrows is like a 122-page sci-fi novel, and it basically reads like a historian talking about events that happened. At its core, it's about like this really, really far into the future, far advanced human civilization that has basically conquered the cosmos, and they run into this god-like power called the Q that gets angry at humans for conquering things, and then in turn the Q creates all of these humanoid, half human, half animal hybrids. Some are to punish the humans for like their quote unquote like hubris for thinking that they could conquer the cosmos because the Q was doing that. But then some of them were just like human pets. Some humans retained their entire consciousness, and some humans basically became animals. And it is such an interesting read. Like, it's really short, so if you're like into that idea, you should just read it because it's like 100 pages. But the way that the author sketched out these creatures, it just got to me. And I think it's because it seems so real and so uncanny. It's crazy to me that someone was able to sketch these out and like really make it seem that uncanny, like it is so alien. And the way the Q are described is so alien. And then there's like this kind of Existenz style biotechnology in this too that's like really creepy and strange. Like there's these dolphin people that create biotechnology because they can't have access to like metal under the water. So like these human dolphin aquatic people learn to mate with other organisms to create basically Existenz technology, where it's like a biotechnology. But what I'm trying to get at is there's like a few scenes in Together where it seemed so alien and so strange and impressive that I was like, okay, All Tomorrows, like you're literally doing All Tomorrows right now. It's really freaking scary. I think All Tomorrows is basically about the indomitable human spirit because of how the humans keep going back to their humanity, and they eventually, actually I don't want to give you spoilers, but it does have like a hopeful vibe to it, but I think at the end of the day it's just like a really brilliantly illustrated novel that really showcases some fucked up body horror. There is one creature that exists on a planet with like 1,000 times gravity. Like the Q put these humans on like a really high gravity planet and they got squished and they have to walk around like all squished and their cities are squished. Ugh, it's actually so fucked up and horrifying. There's also these like basically waste disposal people that get turned into giant meat cubes that can basically just reproduce and that's it. And they are supposed to filter the Q's waste. And these humans got punished specifically because they defeated the Q. And what's fucked up about the cube people is they have their full consciousness. So they have full human consciousness in these cubes. The next one I want to talk about, jumping off of that, is Existenz. I don't think this is like as frightening, but the feeling that I get when they're using the body technology and like the ports, it is so fucking creepy and scary to me, like in a way that disgusts me. Very few horror movies give me like nausea and like this horrible feeling of nausea, and I think Existenz and The Substance really do give me that. But I think Existenz is about the fear of technology. That seems kind of obvious, but I do think it is a grotesque showcase of like how technology could evolve, and I think biotech is just the creepiest, most creative thing ever. And as much as I hate the CGI in this movie, like the CGI is really bad, the practical effects are just so good. And I hate it too. And I think like you looking at this scene and like feeling disgusted has a purpose. It's like maybe technology is invasive and alien. The next body horror that really fucked with me was Color Out of Space. And I think this is the 87th time I've talked about this fucking movie on any of my social medias, and that's annoying because it's not even that great of a movie. Like, I just recently rewatched it. It's essentially about a comet that comes to Earth and then it fucks everybody up because the water gets contaminated. But what happens is the mother and her son become fused a lot, kind of like Together, but they retain their psyches kind of, and it's this like fucked up fusion. I do think this film is about family dynamics and how scary that can be, and I think Nick Cage is really scary in this. But I think specifically with the mother and the son, what I got from this metaphor was the risk that you put yourself in when you love someone or have a child or care about someone, and the body horror of that fear kind of reincarnated into a monster. Because when you like have a child or you love someone or care about someone, the fear of something happening to them is horrifying. And like this thing is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to anybody. Like, I don't think it gets worse than this. That becoming like a part of you and a part of the way you live, I think is really perfectly shown in what happens to this mother and her son. And it is kind of sad because the family is like a nice family, like they love each other and they're not that problematic. So I think that's probably what that means, but that's just my personal opinion. It wouldn't be a body horror video if I didn't talk about Tusk. I'm a Tusk defender. I have said this before and I'll say it again. I think it's a good classic. I think it's a classic body horror, and I think it's A24's response to the trashy, disgusting, cheapo horror trope, and especially Justin Long's performance in it. It's just so funny and it's so, dare I say, campy. What I got from this film was Justin Long being really arrogant and not seeing the signs of himself being in danger. And I think that's funny. Yeah, it plays funny, but also it has a sort of double meaning because of his arrogance and because he obviously is existing as a character of someone who's never seen a horror movie, because there's this creepy guy who has all this creepy shit in his house and Justin Long doesn't notice anything. To me, that's very, very arrogant. And I think deep down, arrogance and almost aloofness of everything, and also selfishness. He's a bit selfish. I think all of that stems from deep insecurity. And him being turned into a walrus monster is very much to me like the ultimate, most embarrassing and insecure thing that could possibly happen to you. Genuinely, it's humiliating. Like, not only is it really disgusting and I think is really gory and awful, but it is humiliating. Like being turned into a tusk by like basically an old man who got you. Like the old man got you. You couldn't defeat this old man who gave you a million signs he was a freak. Literally, that's embarrassing. And I think this Tusk monster thing that he turns into is just a manifestation of the way he lets his own insecurity run his entire life. And that might be reading too deep into it, but I don't really care because that's kind of what I'm doing all the time. I also really, really like the ending. I think everybody hates the ending where he's in the pool and he's in the zoo and they start treating him like an actual animal. Everyone thinks that that shit's like, it's horrible. I think it's perfect. The pit that it leaves in your stomach is so fucked up. And I don't care what anybody says, for it to leave that pit in your stomach while being so audacious and silly and stupid and crazy is such a feat in filmmaking to me. That's like crazy, crazy. Also, I have a weird thing with like submechanophobia, and that sounds like I made it up. And that sounds like, oh, you're just on the internet too much. But I didn't have a name for it until I was online and people started talking about it. I've always been horrified of things in the water, especially like dark water and I can't see underneath. I think it started because I grew up in like a really small town in Cranbrook, BC, which is like literally, it's like basically around Montana, but it's in Canada. But every summer people go to this lake. And I remember the ghost stories people would tell and like the stories about how there was a train that was going around near this lake and it fell into the water and it sunk to the bottom. And if you know about Canada, especially like way up by Montana, the bottom of the lake is basically frozen. Like it's really, really, really cold and the lake doesn't really get that warm even in the summer. So people were saying there was like perfectly preserved bodies down there and perfectly preserved things from the train that fell in and any people that fell in because of what happened. And just like as a kid, I was like, I hate that. I hate that I'm swimming in the water and there's things underneath. So I think it started there. And since then I've had a fucking issue with things in the water. I love to swim. I just won't swim if there's something in there. I think what freaks me out the most is like submerged animatronics. That's the worst of the worst. But also not limited to statues. Big rocks, don't fuck with the big rock. I don't go swimming if there's a big rock. One time I went to the Keys, like Key Largo, which is off the coast of Florida, and I went scuba diving and I saw the underwater statue of Jesus. And when I saw it, I started having a physical reaction and I started like throwing up on the boat. Like it was so embarrassing. I was so embarrassed. I started getting the worst nausea I've ever gotten in my life. And I think that it was because I was scared. I didn't understand, but I was like, the minute I saw it in the water, I was like floating above and I'm like, I can't fucking do this right now. I'm gonna freak out. So anyway, Tusk, the scene where he's learning to be a walrus in that water is disgusting to me. Not only the claustrophobia of being a walrus, but also that dark water and the shit in the water and the fact that it's like a man-made lake thing. Literally, you could not pay me $12 million to be in there. I'm getting sweaty just thinking about it. I hate it. So long story long, Tusk is going on the list. Before I talk about my last one, I do want to throw in 2 honorable mentions. I think the new Shudder movie, The Ugly Stepsister, which is basically Cinderella tale kind of thing. I think the body horror scenes in that film with her eating the worm and her getting her nose job, horrifying. Like I genuinely can't even deal. Obviously that plays into the metaphor of like cosmetic surgery and like trying to look your best and pressures of society and all that jazz. But the scenes of body horror in this movie are just crazy. Also, like the gore in this is just, it's fucked up. But I do want to give an honorable mention to that film. Another honorable mention I want to say is I think American Mary has some really great body horror in it. There's something that makes me uneasy about really intense elective cosmetic surgery. And I'm not talking about gender affirming care. I'm talking about American Mary, hyper elective surgery. You're fucking with implants and stuff that are like illegal basically. But I think American Mary, obviously a feminist anthem, but like obviously that movie is about the horrors of being a woman, but I think it does a really great job in the body horror department. Medical body horror is actually like kind of a rare genre. I rarely find films that are worth talking about in that genre. I don't know why. And the last body horror scene I would like to talk about is the one in the house that Jack built. This film is just like a really, really dark, depraved portrayal of a serial killer. It's one of the few portrayals that actually really freaks me out because it's almost like this sociopathy that's like cold and so unforgiving and so scary. But I think the final scene of the house, it really gets to me. I think it's pretty obvious that it's a metaphor for how disconnected he feels from society, and it's strangely beautiful because he's trying to build his own home and his own belonging with people. Like he wants them involved, but he doesn't understand them in a way that's really alien. Is that kind of heartwarming? Yeah. Is it like the most horrible, disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life? Yeah, it is. I don't think that one needs any more explanation. There's a lot of other really messed up, horrible things that happen in this film, but I think the house takes the cake with body horror. Okay, that's all I have today. Thank you for watching, and I fear this is the last video I'll be making in this set, in my room. I'm moving apartments, so it's also why I'm so busy, but this might be the last you see in this background, so take a good look. Hopefully I can find a paint match for this paint color because I really like it, and I painted that myself, and I really hope I can find a match because I forgot what paint I used and I'd like to have it in my new apartment. Inshallah they let me paint the walls. I'll paint them back, I promise. Peace and love.